You are beautiful. You are beautiful, and you make us feel beautiful inside. Thank you for just letting Spirit have its way through you those years ago, because I tell you, you have a message that's as powerful as any sermon could be about people listening to that voice that has censored their self-expression, their authenticity, their knowing who they've come here to be. And anyone who has that song locked up inside of them needs to listen to that voice and let it sing. Yeah. It reminds me of my own journey, that I would not be standing up here in front of you, in front of any but more than maybe one or two people, if I hadn't listened to a voice that said, you need to be one who shares these teachings. And I was, on a scale of the most fearful thing would be to die, that was just right under the fear of public speaking for me. And I avoided public speaking throughout my professional career every chance I got, because it was just too much, too intimidating. And of course, there's all stories behind why that was the way it was. But the point being was that then something caught me, which was this spiritual awakening, which all of us have. And I was so turned on by these teachings, and that the forward movement of these teachings in me was to want to be able to be offer to someone else what I had received in being on the receiving end of these teachings in a spiritual community. And I denied it for a long time. I just said, it absolutely can't be true. But it wouldn't go away, and that's the way it is with authentic voices. That's the way it is when something comes from your soul, comes from who you really are, is that you can try to keep it back, you can try to discourage, you can try to talk yourself out of it, you can try to even rationalize that it's, you're not listening well, it's a false voice, or it's more of a wish than it is something that's real. But if it's real, it won't go away. It will continue to keep knocking on your door of your heart and keep asking you to give it its time and its space and its place. And I was sharing this with Lucky yesterday, that when I decided I wanted to get on the board of trustees at Spiritual Life at Unity of San Luis Obispo, they said, well, you're going to have to give a talk, in front of the whole congregation. And I went, I don't really need to serve on the board. Don't really need to do that. I didn't say that. I felt that. And then the little voice said, this is your time. This is your time. And so I actually had a few weeks to prepare, so I joined Toastmasters. And I did the first two, the break your ice. No, that's not the icebreaker. Break your ice. Well, that's probably true too, because I was like frozen in my fear. I did the icebreaker speech and the one after that, and I was just able to pretty much be able to stand without shaking too badly. And so when the day came for me to have to deliver this 5-minute talk to the congregation about why I wanted to serve on the board, I didn't sleep that whole night. I was literally awake all night with so much anxiety and fear, and wishing that I hadn't said yes. Does anyone relate to this experience? Okay. Wishing I had said, I could have said no to that offer. But I showed up and had to sit through both services, and then we had the membership meeting, and it was my turn to share. And what was interesting is I got up, and I had the notes, and I'd actually memorized this talk in my head, and I had notes. And I started to read the talk that I had prepared, and something happened. My heart just opened up. And then what came from me was this authentic, heartfelt knowing of why I wanted to share and what this community had meant to me and what these teachings had meant to me. And in the context of not being connected to my mind and to thoughts and premeditated notions of what should be said, I was at complete peace. I was as relaxed as I could be if I was just sitting out in the garden by myself. And what came through me was this really sense of authentic voice. And so here's the beautiful aspect of life, is that sometimes our gift is locked behind our greatest fear. And if we stay stuck in that fear, it can actually make us sick. And I was very unhappy in my life. I was very unhappy with my work, feeling like I was modestly successful in business, but my soul was just starving. And so here how Spirit works was to guide me into this discontent, and then show me the possibility of how life could be more authentic, come up against my greatest fear, and the drive to be authentic. And this is how Spirit loves us. The drive to be authentic is greater than your greatest fear. And it was, in my case, the greatest fear was public speaking. And because Spirit wants you to be yourself, it will push you right up against your greatest fear, so that you're so motivated that you would not have dealt with that fear otherwise if it had been a lesser desire. It has to be strong and authentic. And so I ended up getting rid of this fear of public speaking and finding my authentic voice and finding the gift that I have to share at the same time. And that's the conspiracy that Spirit is about in our lives. It's always working to get us to express more of who we have come here to be. And it will our mind and our ego can confound the process, because it can tell us, oh no, this can't be right, this feels too uncomfortable. But if we know that there is something authentic underneath that, it will push us to be more of ourselves, to be more of itself. And that's the great compensation of this spiritual life, is when we really just allow that to take place. And I know many of your stories and know that that's been true for you as well. So we're here today to wrap up our series on the eye of the storm. We started 7 weeks ago. It doesn't seem like 7 weeks ago to me. Just a flash in the pan, but here we are at the end of our time. And not that we won't revisit these topics again, but for now we'll put them on hold. And we'll always be talking in some ways about these principles, because they're universal. So I want to begin as we began 7 weeks ago, and as we've begun every week since then, is to start with this basic premise, which is that no one is what? Against you. No one's against me. That's what I have to remember. This is the absolute truth. You may not believe it now. You may have a lifetime of evidence to the contrary. But until you realize that the entire universe is for you, you may never experience your wholeness and true worth. The purpose of this book is to awaken you to the truth that there is only one presence and one power at work in your life. And that this presence and power lives in you as the Spirit of God. And for this reason, no one or no thing can be against you. To realize this is to claim your divine inheritance as a beloved creation of God. To be awakened to the truth that there was only one presence and one power in our life is really the highest and only real purpose that we have. And everything else sort of flows from that. And so the paradox of this whole teaching, very much like the paradox that I just shared with you of my own experience and what Carol went through, is that something is at once pushing you to be expressed, and then it seems like the universe, or how we experience life on the outer, seems to be pushing back. And yet, although the ego or the surface mind would say, well, then retreat, or become defensive, or build a case and protect yourself, the truth says, no, get into it. Be present to the storm. Be present to the apparent opposition. Because if you're not present to it, then what you're saying is there's a part of life that my wholeness is not welcome. There's a part of life where spirit is not welcome. Because I'm gonna go and hide over here when I deal with that. And why would we want to, of any times, retreat, have our wholeness retreat in moments when our wholeness is what's really needed? So, and in order for our wholeness to be experienced, we have to be fully present to life. And so this whole teaching has been about us presencing our whole self in the midst of what appears to be against us. And the great paradox is the more we show up with all of who we are to the apparent opposition to life, not only do we have the resources to be with that apparent opposition, but the sense that life is against us dissolves by us being present to it, because then we begin to see that that's just a story that we made up, that it's just an illusion, that it's just what we've come to believe and we've made real in our own minds, that dissolves when our full presencing of who we are can be the replacement for the story that life is against me. Because my fullness and my wholeness, how could it be that anyone or anything could be against wholeness? And when we say wholeness, we're not just talking about, wholeness in your body. We're talking about that you are part of the one presence and the one power. That's how powerful that presence, that wholeness is. And nothing can be outside of it. And if nothing can be outside that which is infinite, then how could there anything be in opposition to the one presence and the one power? You could never get outside of oneness. You can never get out. You're always in oneness. Wherever you go, and anything that you would imagine that could stand in opposition to oneness is a story. It's an illusion, and it's based upon what you and I have come to believe, that we're separate in some ways from the oneness, the presence of God, the presence of love. So it is paradoxical that we move towards the apparent storm in order to get into the eye. And so we can't listen to that voice that tells us, to hunker down. And I was thinking about The Wizard of Oz and how this horrible nightmarish thing goes on, for Dorothy Hale. And in the end, she just wakes up in bed, Oh. It was awful, and it was really nothing. It was just all imagined. And what I learned what she learned in her journey was that she had within herself all along the ability to find peace, to find that longing that she was missing, that sense of disconnect, that sense of separation, that sense of isolation, that sense of not feeling loved. She thought it would be in some fancy, in some other time and place. And then when she finally when the curtain is pulled away, which is metaphorical for, our spiritual vision being made plain, then, there is really no power behind the curtain. There is nothing in the physical world, in the phenomenal world that can save us. That points back, the intelligent, the good witch, points back to what's inside of us. That is our Geiger counter, that is our GPS system that's always guiding us back to the one presence and the one power as a living, breathing, knowing experience of ourself. Wholeness is not outside of you. It's not separate from you. It's the essence of your true nature, the essence of your spiritual identity. And because wholeness is the foundation of my being, nothing can be against me. And this struggle for wholeness is predicated on this belief that there are opposing forces in life. Right? But who can hold your well-being hostage? If your well-being is rooted in the reality of your spiritual nature, what has power greater than the infinite life and love of Spirit? The belief that you need approval or acceptance from people or cooperation from others in order to feel safe and okay is rooted in this belief, separation, and illusion. The Course in Miracles says it this way: the little I, like little Larry, you have your version, seeks to enhance itself by external approval, external possessions, and external love. But the self that God created needs nothing. It is forever complete, safe, loved, and loving. It seeks to share rather than to get, to extend rather than project. It has no needs and wants to join with others out of a mutual awareness of abundance. Most of us live our lives as strategically wanting to manifest the circumstances that will keep that story of our separation alive and keep it protected. And the teachings that we've been working with are the ones that say transformation only comes when you will take that illusion of your separate self, the one that feels that it needs this constant protection and life to be a certain way, and to put it into the fire of truth, so that it can be reduced to the nothingness from which it came. That it can be seen that it has no substance, it has no truth to it. It's just a thought. And in the face of the truth, that thought is laid waste, is dissolved. Jesus talked about all of these metaphors. And one of them was a man discovered a treasure in a field, and he went and he buried that treasure, and then he sold everything he had and went and bought that field. So you and I are invited to sell every notion that separates us from the truth, the context, the field of infinite possibility and wholeness. And to buy that field. To keep going back time and time again until the awareness of that field is your only awareness. And that everything else that seems to be oppositional to that or against that is seen only as a fleeting thought. Like bubbles. That as you look at them through the eyes of truth, they burst, they burst, they burst. And you're back home again. You're back in your bed, like Dorothy Hale, knowing you're safe. So Dr. Gary Simmons, who wrote this book, I don't know if you remember, if you read the book, in the very beginning, he tells a story about these spiritual teachers that he went with, and they were so sort of seeing his game, he's seeing what kind of programming was in his mind and how he was running his life, and they busted him, basically. We're asking Spirit to bust us from our illusions, from the untruths. And they said to him as he was leaving, they said, no one is against you. Make your path be about proving this truth, and you will discover what wholeness really is. To make our path about proving that no one and nobody is against us is the very way that we experience our wholeness. And wouldn't it make sense that if what we're really interested in is living the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, that we would be on alert for all those things which are false. To become sort of a lie detector, where we just say, is that really true? Or is that something that I have come to believe? And if life feels to be against us, or if we feel that we're being diminished in some way by life, then we know that can only come from who we are not, the story of limitation, the story that I am only this. And we can just raise that up into the light of truth and ask that it be taken from us, that it be seen for what it is. And this has been my journey and many of your journey, is to constantly just keep questioning the false and seeing through the false, so that we now make space in us for the truth to be recognized and realized. And that's what this whole journey is about. And it's worth all of our time. It's worth all of our energy. It's worth all of our efforts. I think that there's a part of me that would like to stay with this series until it's all over, you know? Because I don't know anything more practical than going right to the heart of the problem and exposing it for what it is. And so as we move forward, we will continue to keep raising up this question. We will continue to keep raising up the notion that there's only one presence and one power in the universe, and you're it. You are one with it. You aren't like related to it like a really good, kindred spirit cousin or something. You are it. It doesn't look like you're it because we all look so different. And we emphasize the differences, and we rob ourselves of the experience of the oneness of our nature. And so you and I are here to go to this masquerade party called the human scene, with 7 billion of us all wearing our own costumes. And then to perceive that all of us are wearing these costumes, but we're all expressions of this infinite, spacious spirit of life and love. And that anything that keeps us from seeing it that way and does harm to ourselves or others is really the only thing that we need to work on. We don't need to make anybody any more spiritual. Isn't that good news? I was so glad to hear that. Were you? It's just like, I thought I had to get more spiritual, like I got to go to church and get more spiritual. I got to pray more so I get more spiritual. I got to meditate longer so that I can get more spiritual. You can't get any more spiritual. It's like, a wave or something going to ocean school to become more like the ocean, It's like this wave going, I don't think I'm wet enough. Do you know where I might get wetter? Is there a place that waves can go that feel somewhat dry and dehydrated and not quite ocean-like? It's ridiculous. But it's the same thing for us. We're like the waves that pop up and, out of this seeming unique thing that's called my body and my mind. Yeah? And then I look around and I go, oh, I feel so unspiritual. I feel I'm just this. This is all I am. And all the while, who I really am is this life, this love, this infinite spacious nature, this presence, this power that's taken on an appearance of a wave. Only for a time, whatever that time is, who knows how much time we show up in this particular wave form. And then the wave goes away and it goes back into the nothingness. It goes back into the infinite field. And then you're more like your true nature there. And when you're not in the formed nature. Now you're more ocean. You're the ocean of love. You're back in the ocean of love again. And then something happens and pop back up again and take on some new form. But that's all secondary. What you and I are here for, what spiritual growth is about, is becoming more familiar with our primary nature. Prior to form, prior to thought, how do you know you are you? How do you know that you exist? And this is a wonderful thing you can do in your meditation, is just, how do I know that I am? Not I am, because we tend to go with I am, and then we fill in the subject. I'm a man, I'm a minister, I'm a husband, I'm a father. Those are objects of this infinite nature. But we never spend any time with just the I am. And that's where you and I are all one. And that's the part of us that never fails. That's the part of us that always has what it needs. That's the part of us that never seeks, that never has a resentment for anyone, or never feels cheated by life, never feels that it has to get even, never feels like it has to get more. So this is what we want to become familiar with. And we begin by sort of knocking down, sort of whacking the moles that are the representations of who we are not. No, I'm not my body, and I'm not my mind, and I'm not what I do for a living, and I'm not how much money I make. I'm not where I live. I'm not, what this person said about me. I'm not how my parents raised me. I'm not. And then whack, 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 whack until when the game is over, you realize that I am. Period. And then you can relax. And you call off the search. And you can call a ceasefire. And you can be about extending rather than getting. About sharing what you know yourself to be. The love that you are. And wouldn't your life be completely different if that was your reality? And wouldn't the world be an amazing place if even a handful of those who are difference makers would have that recognition and be expressing that? It's absolutely possible. Why? Because it's already true. We don't have to make it true. We just have to recognize the truth that we keep overlooking in search of something that is the proverbial chasing of the tail. You never catch it, and you wear yourself out. And you go buy another book. I have hundreds of books. Go to another workshop, go to another class. Maybe the next Sunday sermon, maybe that'll be it. God, I hope so. Repetition is only required because we repeatedly see amiss. We repeatedly overlook the truth. That's the only reason for repetition. You only need to hear this once and then take it in fully. That rarely happens in the world when you hear people having these enlightening experiences where they suddenly know everything. And all sense of separation and limitation is gone. Those are rare events. Usually it's a progressive realization over time, what we call time. And it's worthy of all of our efforts and the time we take in these gatherings, because it is happening. It's happening in me, it's happening in you, I see it. And sometimes it's just, you have to be really vigilant to pay attention to the progress you're making. And it may not be that suddenly you're no longer have any resentments, but it may be that the resentment that you have today has a shorter half-life to it than what it had maybe 6 months ago. And you go, I used to hold on to that for days. Now I hold on to it for hours. Because we're moving progressively into the recognition that nobody and nothing can be against us. Will you stay with me? Yeah. All right. Blessings. Thank you.